Now she had a hole in her fuel tank and she was due to go racing about 30 minutes later. So what did she do? She took up the bread from her sandwiches, put it into the hole, tied a piece of string round it, and off she went.
This is the Aston Martin Heritage Podcast.
Hello and many thanks for choosing to plug into our podcast. I am Gary Taylor. For this episode, we are at Aston Hill 100 event, held on the 17th of May 2025. Well, I say we, I mean our roving reporter Steve Waddingham. It was to celebrate the Hill's rich motorsport heritage and share the history of events that took place between 1904 and 1925, being the location for many of the nation's biggest Hillclimb events. It was not an Aston Martin event, but part giving its name to our favourite cars, needless to say, Aston Martins were there in force. The recording was done over several days, starting on the day AML shot their film with the Valkyrie alongside a 1924 side valve, would you believe? Then a preview the night before, and of course the day itself. Steve managed to bag some great interviews with owners and visitors, including Michelle McDermott, Etienne, Chilton Aston, Pat with a very special virage, Yuki all the way from Japan, and the grandson of Robert Banford, and more. With the AMHT having a stand showing off A3, we are grateful to Aston Martin to provide a DBX to place alongside. Quite a contrast. Before I hand over to Steve, I just received a message from our lawyers. Now, you may have heard in the opening before the jingle a reference to plugging a fuel tank hole with bread from a sandwich. They quite clearly say, do not try this at home. A croissant is much better.
So today I am at the bottom of Aston Hill, currently in the golf club car park, and stood next to me is a good old friend of mine, Keith Brissenden from AML. Keith, what are we doing here this morning next to your favourite golf course?
We've got the Valkyrie here and a 1924 Aston, and we're going to do some hill climbs this morning. So, yeah, going to be a great day this morning.
Yeah, so we're here a couple of weeks ahead of the 100th anniversary event that's coming up at Aston Hill. And today we are going to shoot a film with a Valkyrie and a 1924 side valve. But yeah, partly thanks to some of the help that we've had from the local community at Aston Clinton, including Mike Stark, who's the co-author of the book that's recently come out on the subject of Aston Hill's history, and also Steve, the chairman of the golf club. We're currently in the golf club car park with about a dozen cars here, all support vehicles for the filming, and we've got the Valkyrie and the side valve here as well. But Keith, tell the audience at home about your career at Aston, because you actually live very close to Aston Clinton, and this really is your local golf club. How many years have you been at Aston Martin for?
Approaching 18 years, so I started in 2007, and it was after a visit to Newport Pagnell, and we were shown around by Kingsley riding Fels, and I was just like a kid in a candy shop, to be honest, and from that day I wanted to work for Aston. 6 months later I arrived. Yeah,
and here we are today in your sort of home, on your home turf. What does it mean to you, Aston Hill? Is it something you think about very often in terms of, working for Aston Martin? Do you ever think about the hill?
Absolutely. Every Aston I've ever had overnight has come up the hill. It's just like, I live 4 miles away, so it's not going out my way, but it just seems that you have to bring Aston up the hill if you've got one.
I know, it's amazing, isn't it? I've been up the hill a few times in various Astons, and I was up the hill a few weeks ago doing a bit of sort of maintenance work with the monument, and I turned round and a DBX was coming down the hill, presumably somebody that owned the car locally, had a local registration number, and it went through my mind. I thought, I wonder if the owner of that car realises the significance of the hill to our history. But yeah, it means a lot to me, and it sounds like it means a lot to you as well, Keith.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we've got circa 500 members here, and there's a little bit on our website that's hidden away, and it's surprising how many people do not know that Chiltern Forest Golf Club is on Aston Hill, and Aston Hill is where the Aston from Aston Martin came from. People are quite amazed when you tell them.
Just tell us, Keith, a little bit about what you do day to day and what your career's been at Aston Martin. You say you started 18 years ago. What was your first role here?
First role was workshop supervisor for the modern workshop at Newport Pagnell. So at the time that was DB7, Vanquish, DB9, up to the 2011 DBS and the V12 Vantages. And then for the last almost 15 years I've been at Gaydon working for client services. So currently my main role is UK customers, but I also look after our European after sales team.
So really it's sort of backing up dealers and customers that have got issues that need a bit of extra help to resolve, presumably.
Absolutely. It can be anything from a customer phoning up for a paint code to a customer that's got some problems with either a car or a warranty concern. So every day's different. We get to speak to people from across the world, so it's nothing unusual to start at 8 o'clock in the morning and receive a call from Australia, or late in the afternoon we could be on a call from a customer in the USA. In between times it's mainly UK.
Brilliant. Well, I hope you get to play a bit of golf later on. It's certainly a lovely day for it, and thanks very much for having a chat with us today. Cheers Keith.
Cheers, Steve. Thank you.
Steve, I'll start again.
That's Steve, I'm Mike.
So I'm now stood here with Mike and Steve outside the golf club on Aston Hill. Mike, you've been very, very busy recently in terms of looking into Aston Martin history and Aston Hill history in particular. Tell us about what you've been up to for the last few months.
Right, well, thanks, Steve. And the last few months, in fact years, have been very busy. Firstly, preparing for the Aston Hill centenary event that we've got coming up in 2 weeks' time on the 17th of May. It's going to be 100 years since the last event held at Aston Hill, or the last Hillclimb event held at Aston Hill. And so we've been very busy preparing for a big event we've got coming up, which is going to feature a classic car and motorcycle show in the grounds of Hill Farm at the top of the hill, with the highlight of which is going to be a parade of period vehicles. So these are cars and motorcycles built prior to 1926, so the period when Aston Hill was active.
And some of those cars are Aston Martins?
There's a lot of Aston Martins. I think we've got 8 or 9 Aston Martins taking part, including Cloverleaf, a Green Pea and an Aston Martin Tourer that all competed at Aston Hill in period. So 3 actual cars with Aston Hill history, plus a number of other, well-known Aston Martins such as Razorblade and so on. So a number of Aston Martins taking part in the parade. We've actually got 86 vehicles entered. The entry is actually closed today, coincidentally, and we've got 86 cars and motorcycles entered for the parade. So that's going to be taking place on the morning of Saturday the 17th of May, really recreating the history. We've been working very closely with the Vintage Sports Car Club to identify owners of cars of the similar type that competed at Aston Hill in period, and so we're really trying to recreate the atmosphere and the sorts of equipment and machines that competed here.
Yeah, and the grey car that we're filming with today is one of those cars that competed here back in period, isn't it?
That's correct, yes. So the Cloverleaf was competed here on the 16th of May 1924, driven by Noel Beardsell, and it finished second in class. So a car with some great Aston Hill history. And then the other thing that's taken up the time recently is obviously the researching the history of the hill for the book that we've recently published. That's been quite an undertaking, but a very enjoyable and fascinating piece of work. And we were pleased to publish our book a few months ago. In fact, you were there at the launch at Race Retro back in February. And we've been delighted with the response we've received. We've had, in fact, we sadly underestimated the interest, and we've had to have a second lot printed already because we've sold out of the first lot of books. So that's taken up a lot of time as well. But I think been very worthwhile, and also really helped us as we prepared for the centenary, because we've had a lot of questions from people about cars and drivers and riders that competed on the hill in period, and we've been able to answer those questions because we've had the documents and the research and the details required. So that's taken up a lot of time, but been very worthwhile.
Brilliant, thank you. And also, while we're talking about the car that we've got here today, the chassis number of this car is 1926. One of the other cars that will be here in a few weeks' time is 1922, the car belonging to Neil Murray.
Yeah.
And that is the other car that competed with it on that day in 24. Correct. There was another car which I think was Bunny, I think, wasn't
Bunny,
it?
yeah.
Bunny unfortunately disappeared many decades ago, although I did see a piece of what we believe was Bunny recently, so nice to think a little bit of it.
That was one of Aston Martin's most successful events, because obviously the 16th of May 1924, which was the Open Hillclimb organised by the Herts County Auto and Aero Club, you not only had Cloverleaf competing and finishing second in class, and the other tourer that was driven by A.A. Pollard, which is the car that obviously Neil Murray is bringing in a couple of weeks' time, but also the Bunny was here, and that was driven by Eddie Hall, and he won the J Cup. And the J Cup was one of the most prestigious awards at Aston Hill. It was awarded to the highest placed club member of the Herts County Auto and Aero Club, and so it was the only time Aston Martin won the prestigious J Cup, and that was the 1924 event. Yeah,
pretty amazing. And anyone that's been to Gaydon over the years for a factory visit may remember seeing a little primrose yellow stroke cream coloured car with brown wings. And just to let you know, that car is chassis number 1925, so it's a car built before the grey one, before it. And A3, a lot of people will know A3. The chassis number of that car is 1918, which is actually a later chassis number that was given to the car. But it just goes to show the pecking order of these cars when they were built, and the fact that they survived today. So it's pretty amazing, really. We're just going to quickly grab Steve, who's the chairman of the golf club, before he runs away. Sorry, Steve. Steve, what's it like being the chairman of a golf club with a very famous kind of connection?
The first question, what's it like being the chairman of a golf club? It's bloody busy. It's not fair. But yeah, it's a fantastic club with the history of the hill, which I didn't know about until Mike let us know. But this land was owned by the Rothschilds, like most of Buckinghamshire.
Yeah.
And then the RAF bought it in the 70s to create the golf club.
So it was an RAF golf club originally? Or?
It was originally the RAF Halton Golf Club until the mid-late 80s, when it became a members club. It was only 9 holes, and then we bought some land off the Forestry Commission to create 18 holes, designed by Henry Cotton, a pretty famous name in golf. And we would say it, but we think we've got the most beautiful courses in the country.
Well, it is amazing, and I'm watching. The mist is burning off the Chiltern Hills in front of us. I got here at 6 o'clock this morning, and it is just spectacular. Every time I come to this hill, the sun's always shining. It always looks lovely, and your golf course really does look beautiful. Sorry, ladies and gentlemen, we have a Valkyrie starting up now. Right, well, I think it's time to say thank you, Steve.
Thanks, it's been a pleasure to host you.
Yeah, thank you very much for your patience with us this morning. And thank you, Mike. Thank you for coming along and talking to us. And I'll see you on the day in a couple of weeks' time.
Look forward to it. Thanks, Steve.
Thank you. So it's Friday, the day before the event at Aston Hill. And I've just bumped into a friend of mine. In fact, I don't know if we've actually met before in person, but we've been talking for a long time, all the way from France. So introduce yourself and tell us who you are and why you're here.
Hello, my name is Etienne Dricot from France, close to the Belgian border. I'm a fan of Aston Martin for a while, and in the club, Aston Martin Owner Club, for 33 years. And then over the last 15 years, I wrote books about Aston Martin. My favorite period are in the 50s, the 60s, and now the 70s with the late V8, X-Pac for the end. And then my passion is to share this passion around the cars, all the people around the world, and especially in the UK with you, Steve.
Well, it's really, I mean, literally, I was walking back to my car and I bump into you in the car park here. We're opposite the Bell pub, which has got its own history as well with Aston Martin, and you're staying there tonight, I believe.
Yes, we will be there tonight and to enjoy the meeting with different people here and there, because this is a very well-known place for Aston Martin, of course.
Yeah, absolutely. And tomorrow is going to be an amazing event. Only time this has ever happened. I don't think it's ever going to happen ever again. There's a lot of Aston Martins coming here. There's also lots of other cars from the 1920s that will be here tomorrow. and it should be really fabulous, shouldn't it?
Yes, and we expect a lot of people, and I am sure we will break the record of the quantities of Aston Martin fans, cars, and so on.
Absolutely. And I think we ought to give our books a little bit of a plug here. I've just shown you my prototype book that I've got, and you're about to launch a book as well, aren't you?
Yes, this is the point. My third volume, which will be about the DBS, from DBS to V8. So, in other words, from 67 to 88, to cover all the cars, which was designed by William Townes. And then, as the previous book, show every possible models from the V8, the engines, Vantage, Volante, Vantage Volante, Volante Vantage, and so on, with every possible model made by the factory.
Yeah, absolutely brilliant. Any true Aston Martin fan needs to have these books because they're a lovely set of books to have. Beautifully designed and beautiful photographs and lots of really good information in them. So, yeah, well, it's really lovely to bump into you in the car park. Looking forward to seeing you tomorrow with everybody else. Have a good night in the Bell.
You too, and all the fans.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
See you tomorrow. Take care.
You too.
Bye-bye. So, Gary, I'm now back on top of Aston Hill again. It's just gone 5 o'clock Friday afternoon. Again, a few hours before the event tomorrow. It's all very peaceful up here at the minute. There's nobody here. There's an aeroplane flying overhead, as there often is in this part of the world. And I'm stood right next to the monument on top of Aston Hill, which has had a little bit of very light restoration work recently, just to tidy it up a little bit ahead of the event. And actually, one thing, if you ever find this monument, it's right at the top of Aston Hill, right next to what used to be the mountain bike car park, which is nowadays is locked up. There's a barrier with a padlock on it, and it hasn't been used for some years. They had a lot of nasty accidents up here when it was open to the public, so it's been closed for many years. It's a beautiful spot. It kind of overlooks the kind of the Chiltern Hills, really. But if you ever come to find the monument, you need to get to the top of the hill, look for Aston Hill, Forester, England on the sign for the car park, look for the barrier. There's a lovely house opposite, another house which used to feature in the racing back in the old days. Anyway, if you nip behind the barrier, probably about 20 foot away from the barrier is the monument. And I'll give you a tip: if you do come to look at it and you want to take a photograph of it, walk round the back of the monument. It's only a couple of metres high, but if you walk round the back of it, you will see that it's double-sided, and the plaque that is on the back of the monument is in a little bit better condition than the one on the front. So if you want to take a photo, take a photograph of the one at the back, and it's just a little bit better condition. And I'll read it out to you. It says the origin of Aston Martin. There's a picture, like a drawing of AM270, which was the prototype, as it was called. One of the cars, well, the car built after Coal Scuttle. The car broke in half actually, and it gave birth to another car called Bunny. So later days given chassis numbers B2 on both cars. Anyway, there's a picture of the car with Lionel Martin driving it, and it says AM270 in 1923. It's in like an oval photo, drawing. It's in a kind of an oval picture with AM270 1923 for Lionel Martin driving the car. And then it says below that the origin of Aston Martin. Then got the wing logo from the period of when this monument was put up here, and it says Aston Hill, part of Lord Rothschild's estate, was a renowned motoring venue. Lionel Martin made his first ascent of this hill in a Tunesinger car on the 4th of April 1914. Shortly afterwards, on the 16th of May, at the Herts County Automobile and Aero Club meeting, he was so successful that the sporting light car, first registered in his name in March 1915, was called an Aston Martin. And it was the start of a legend in the history of the automobile. This plaque was placed here by the Aston Martin Owners Club and Aston Martin Lagonda Limited. I can't remember the exact year when it was put up here, but it was sort of mid 1990s and mid to late 1990s. Been here a long time, basically. But, you know, for me, this is a kind of little bit of a ground zero type place to visit. It's where the name comes from. And, I always love coming up here and reflect on all the things that have happened in the last 112 years, really. And you have to remember, the company itself was formed 112 years ago. That's Bamford and Martin Limited. The brand name was first sort of mentioned in 1914, so as we are now 111 years ago. And then the first car that was applied to was the car we now know as Coal Scuttle, and that car was registered on the 16th of March 1915. And as I'm talking now, the date is actually the 16th of May 2025, and as the plaque says, what happened here happened on the 16th of May 1914. So quite poignant, really. I think I might just, when I finish recording, take a moment just to sort of think about things that have happened in all those decades that have followed this momentous occasion. So there you go, Aston Hill Monument. And tomorrow this is going to be very, very busy round here. Hundreds and hundreds of cars come in. Should be a great day. And I think, as they say on the news, back to you in the studio, Gary.
Thanks, Steve. Yes, here I am at the podcast news desk studio. So that was covered a few days beforehand. And now, Steve, back to you again and for you to cover the main event. Can you just remind us what day it is?
17th of May 2025. And here we are. This is the day we've all been looking forward to. This is the 100th anniversary of the last ever event held at Aston Hill. I'm now in the field full of all the cars that are going to be on display here today. There's also a whole bunch of cars that are period cars that raced on the hill back in the day between 1904 to 1925. Many of them are actual cars that competed here. Some of them are the same type of car, and those cars will all be coming up in like a parade starting in a little while. But once they get here, they'll form up and they'll be on display here amongst all the other cars. We've also got some of the trade stands here as well. We've got Chiltern Aston to one side, and I say I'm actually sat in the AMHT marquee that we've got, and on the other side of us we've got Acura Batelli, and also one of the main sponsors for the event, Immunage, owned by a great friend of ours, Yuki, who's here today riding in his 1923, 24, trying to think what year it is now. I think it's 1924 car, and he's come all the way from Japan to be part of this amazing event today. So Gary, throughout the day I'll be chatting to people as I come across them about why they're here, what their interest is with Aston Martin. We've got in the marquee, we've got A3, which is the oldest surviving Aston Martin in the world, and we've got a brand new DBX 707 with us as well, which I think is a really appropriate car to have here, because if you think about what the road surfaces were like in the 1920s, it wasn't tarmac, it was a kind of a loose, chalky kind of flinty type material, and you wouldn't have really been able to have driven very quickly in a modern sports car on that type of surface, but you definitely could in a DBX. The DBX would have been right at home, hammering up the hill on a loose surface like that with its four-wheel drive capability. So I think it's really appropriate to have the latest hill climbing car with us in terms of what it's capable of doing. And if you look at old cars, one thing you'll always notice is they sit a lot higher off the ground than modern vehicles do. And that was really for practical reasons, because back in the 20s, road surfacing was still in its infancy. Lots of roads were unmade. So effectively every car was an off-roader of some description. But yeah, throughout the day we'll be talking to people, and who knows what may come along. Looking forward to it. So morning, Michelle.
Morning, Steve.
Fancy meeting you here today on top of Aston Hill.
Freezing cold though, isn't it? Absolutely chilly.
Yeah, I'm reassured it's going to be a bit warmer later on, and the cloud will go. But yeah, good to see you. Let's get you to introduce yourself and tell the listeners who you are and why we know each other.
Okay, well, I'm Michelle McDermott, and back in 2019, I completed my master's degree in genealogical, paleographic and heraldic studies, which is rather a mouthful, but the best thing to say is that I did my dissertation looking at 1913 to 1925, the Bamford and Martin years, and I researched the individuals behind the brand. So not the chassis or the gearboxes or anything else, but the people. And without the people, we wouldn't have the brand that we know and love today.
Yeah, that's right. And I remember the way this kind of got going. I seem to remember you did a performance driving course at Millbrook. The instructor phoned me that evening and said, I've met this really interesting lady about to do a big project and wants to do it on Aston Martin history. Would you talk to her? And of course we spoke. And I said, please just don't do the usual David Brown bit. We desperately would like to know more about the 1920s. But even in my wildest imagination, I don't think I ever expected that we'd get so much information, so thoroughly investigated. Not just the key characters, but pretty much everybody that was employed by Bamford and Martin Limited, and also all the drivers and the early owners of the cars. And it is a really great piece of work. Yeah, tell us about some of your favourite characters from that period.
I think my favourite character is Winifred Pink. She was one of the first lady drivers, and she had an Aston Martin, and she drove up the Aston Hillclimb that we are here today. So for me to be able to stand in the footsteps of Winifred Pink is fabulous. But she was the sort of person that came from a family, a well-to-do Edwardian family, and her father, we could have been having Tate and Pink instead of Tate and Lyle or Lyle and Pink. Her father was in the sugar business, and the company was doing really well until, unfortunately, they had somebody fall in a vat of boiling apple, and the company went down the hill. But Winifred had spent time in the factory because her parents were so involved with the business, with the guys with the machinery, learning how things work. So she had a mechanical brain. And for a woman in the 1920s, that was really something quite different. And she used to go to Brooklands and race. And there was one afternoon at Brooklands where she could, driving around the circuit, and she could hear this clanking noise. So she stopped, she came off, she went back into the area that she was leaving the car in, and she could hear this rattling in her fuel tank. So, being the engineer that she was, she cut a hole in the fuel tank, put her hand in, fished around, and found a piece of solder that had just fallen into the fuel tank. Now she had a hole in her fuel tank, and she was due to go racing about 30 minutes later. So what did she do? She took up the bread from her sandwiches, put it into the hole, tied a piece of string around it, and off she went. Now, this wouldn't happen in today's society, but you can just imagine it and picture it, this woman hurtling around with a ham sandwich stuck behind her, stopping the fuel coming out. So for me, Winnie Pink is one of those people who was totally devoted to her sport, loved speed, but was so practical as well.
I think a lot of people will be quite surprised to know that a lot of our early owners were ladies. And in fact, our first ever customer was Marion Agnew, or Marion Morgan, later on, who bought the car we now know as Green Pea, and another incredible character from that era. But yeah, it's a fascinating period of our history. We'll have to do a separate episode, I think, Michelle, on this one. But good to see you today. Enjoy the day.
Thanks, Steve. Well, great to see you. Let's hope we have a great day's racing.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. See you soon.
Growing the passion, sharing the stories. The Aston Martin Heritage Podcast.
So I'm now stood with Guy Wiles from Chiltern Aston, who are one of the main sponsors of the event. And, we're surrounded with some great cars here, Guy. And we're going to talk about one in particular in a minute with your father, Gordon, when we get his attention. But first of all, tell us about who you are, what the business is all about, and what you've got with you today.
Good morning. So my name's Guy Wiles, and I'm Gordon Wiles' son. And as might be fairly obvious in that I'm the next stage in this family business that's been going since 1968. It's an Aston Martin heritage operation, so our job is to make sure that the older cars, from your V12 Vanquish back to the DB2s technically, are maintained to the same standard or spec that they would have been when they were new. So we can basically return these lovely old girls back to, what they were like when they were current. We're also an Aston Martin approved body repair centre, and that gives us a lot more abilities in that field, because it means we can do all the structural stuff as well as the actual engineering as well. But really, we're very much involved in the new stuff too. I would say that certainly half the business is dealing with the VH platform onwards, and we can look after the 225 model year cars with all the latest diagnostic kits. So we're sort of a one-stop shop for all things Aston Martin. If you've got a new one, we can service it for you. If you've got an old one, we can restore it for you. If you need looking after and you care about real customer service, well, a family business is always going to be very good at that, because we have to care, and that's really what the sort of the mantra is: look after the client, and everything else does generally fall into place.
Tell us about some of the cars you brought with you today. I know you've got a real mixture of cars here, different ages.
Well, I mean, let's start on the top left. You've got the Aston Martin V600, one of circa 83 or 4, depends who you ask. That is a one-of-one spec. It's in British Racing Green over tan, and
that's actually the car that Les and I drove for the podcast recently.
It is.
In fact, Les is just walked past us, funny enough. But so it's a great car, isn't it?
I mean, they just go like hell, and yet are as comfortable as a living room. I don't understand how that happened in the mid-90s, but it did. I mean, what a different way to do a supercar. Looks like nothing else, scares all other road users because it's like a rhino behind you. And then
a charging rhino. What else have we got here? The red car.
Beautiful 3,000 mile one-owner DB9 Volante, 2014. It's sort of collector spec, you could say, because it's a one of one. It's got a cream interior with red stitching, so it's getting very close to a strawberry sundae, you could argue, but it is dangerously pretty if you like that sort of thing. To its right, we've got one of the Seven Sisters, a 4-door V8 Lagonda Series 1. So it was essentially an Aston Martin Series 3 that was stretched and given 4 doors. And this is chassis number 1, and we've just done a sympathetic restoration. So full bare metal repaint, new retrim, honed engine components, things like that. But it hasn't been completely stripped the body off, because it's very hard to do that on these sort of V8 era cars. You can do it, but it doesn't make financial sense. To the right, however, is a DB5 1965 that has had a body off restoration, nut and bolt. It's essentially a one-owner car in California sage over tan. It's original colours. Steve, you helped us with this car.
Well, I'm going to say I think this car's for sale now, isn't it? Is that right?
I mean, so is the Lagonda. In fact, every car here, bar the DB6, which I'll come on to in a moment, which we did a body off restoration twice for this client whose daughter was getting married, and then COVID happened. So we rebooked the engine for him first, and then the wedding got cancelled because COVID got in the way. So then we did a body off restoration during the COVID months, and so the wedding kept being postponed, and finally the car was finished just as the wedding happened. But so we did a restoration in reverse for him. So he's very happy.
Let's go and grab your dad and let's have a chat with Gordon, aka GW, and let's dive in here with the mic running. Hello Gordon, good morning. Sorry to put you on the spot. In fact, everywhere I look round here, not only are there legendary cars, but legendary people everywhere, and I'm sitting in front of one now. Gordon, tell us who you are back home for the listeners, and then I'm going to pick your brains about the car in the middle here.
Right, well, Gordon Wells, Chilton Aston in Bovingdon, so we're quite near here. Established 68. So yeah, we're very proud to be here and very, very grateful to have been invited.
Now tell us about this wonderful car, which I am so pleased to see here today, because I've been watching you restore this car over a long period of time now, because it's a complicated car. Tell us what we've got in front of us.
Well, it's the long-lost first version of the Sotheby Special, as it was known, which starts life as a DBS V8 1971 with the aluminium and these outer superstructures removed, and Ogle designed a new and quite bespoke body to it, which is perhaps rather Marmite. You either love it or you hate it. And it was there to promote a cigarette brand called the Sotheby Special Cigarettes.
Doesn't really get any more 70s than that, does it? An Aston Martin with a V8 engine built to promote a cigarette brand. and actually, for those that are listening, you might know this more simply as the Ogle Aston Martin, very distinctive. If you're a person of a certain age and you used to have top trump cars, it's a sort of car that you'd see on a top trump card. Very futuristic. The rear end is like a big stainless steel panel full of lights, if I remember rightly.
Yes, there was a series of lights, and the top rows were the brake lights. So if all the brake lights came on at once, then that was maximum braking, and gentle braking, you had ever less lights come on. So it was Tom Carron, the designer's idea, that he would give people some idea about how fast the car in front was stopping.
And if I remember rightly, Tom Carron, the guy that did the Scimitar GTE?
He did, I understand he did, and the Bug and the Chopper bicycle, I believe, was his.
Yeah, quite a man. And the car also distinctively has got a glass roof, so the whole of the roof is made by triplets in glass, and it's got like a tint with a stripe on it, if I remember rightly.
Yes, it's supposed to be heat-reducing gold-coloured stripes on the inside. This car only had Perspex.
Okay, but what a great car. I know this has been a really difficult restoration because it's so unique. You've got special metalwork you've had to fabricate and patch together. Thank you for bringing it to Aston Hill. I can't think of a better place to preview it in its sort of part restored form than bringing it back to ground zero to Aston Hill, and just a few miles away from where your workshop is. So Gordon, thank you very, very much indeed for sponsoring the event. I'm saying thank you on behalf of the organisers. It isn't an Aston Martin event, but we feel very close to it because of our name. But thank you on behalf of everybody, and thank you for the service that you provide to the Aston Martin community generally.
Well, it's been a great pleasure to bring it, and thank you for your kind words.
Thanks, Gordon. See you soon. I've just bumped into another old friend of mine. Pat, good to see you today. What's really great about this event is there are obviously lots of pre-war Astons here, but there are also lots of Aston Martins of all ages and types, and you have a really unique one. So if you could just introduce yourself and tell us what car you've bought today.
I'm Pat Fallon, and I've got the Lynx Turbo Virage.
Yeah, and quite. This really is a one-off car, isn't it? It's a very, very special car, and you've had it for some years now. I seem to remember.
Yeah, I've owned it for about 10 years, and it is a bit of a one-off. Obviously, it's got the turbocharger. There's a lot more to it than that. It's a lot of chassis modifications, and there's a lot of upkeep involved, a lot of improvement on what was done originally, because obviously technologies have changed, so I've been able to improve the car, and now I'm quite satisfied with it.
Well, that's an understatement. And for everybody listening, Lynx as in Lynx, the people that modified Jaguars and built C-types and D-types, is that the same Lynx?
That's it, yeah. At the time, this when it was done originally in around 2000, Aston Martin couldn't do the work on it. So although there was some information backwards and forwards between Aston Martin and Lynx, they couldn't be directly involved because Ford were in the takeover process at that time, and it didn't suit them at the time. But Lynx, yes, that company, although they've now moved out of the UK and I think they're in Spain at the moment.
And in terms of what they achieved, or what you've achieved, because I know you've done a constant amount of engineering updates and, as you say, using methods and new technology, what sort of horsepower is the car up to now, and where did it start off at?
It's around 800 at the moment.
800 brake horsepower, 7 litre with a turbo on it, and the original Virage was 5.3, about 350 brake horsepower, I think.
330, I think.
And what about today? What does it mean to you being here today on Aston Hill?
Fantastic. What an event. I know it's not just Astons, but obviously for us it's primarily an Aston event.
Brilliant. Well, thanks ever so much, Pat. It's really good to see you again, and thanks for bringing your car here today to share in this fantastic one-off event. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Steve. Good to see you again.
So, Yuki, lovely to see you. I think you win the award for the furthest travelled today, because you've come a long, long way. Tell everybody where you're from.
I'm from Japan, and just yesterday came here, and I really enjoyed for all the. It's a people associate, citizen, everybody, children and old person and other people, to celebrate Aston Hill. They love the place and the history and the car, and everybody smiling.
So, I know, it is, isn't it? I've not stopped smiling all morning, actually. I'll get Yuki to explain in a minute some of the cars that he owns, but there's one in particular, very, very special car, which is here today. In fact, by the time you hear this podcast recording, there will have been a video that will be out on social media featuring Yuki's car, and it's one of the cars that competed here in 1924. Tell us about your collection of cars and how you've ended up with some of the cars you have.
Oh, for the reason why, because all my family is Land Rover. Range Rover is a nice car for if you have family, skiing and camping. But since people grown up, I and my wife have discussion how we can enjoy our life. Then we become as interested for Aston Martin, 2-seaters. So the first car was a DB7, and then Vanquish S. And then we had a chance with DB5 for full restoration because of we become of the Aston Martin Racing official partner since 2005.
And that's with your own company, Immunage. So many people might recognise the name Immunage from the racing liveries of our cars in the 2000s. And then your collection of cars started to grow a little bit in terms of you've got cars that were built at Newport Pagnell and Bloxham, and then other eras of our history have crept into your collection as well. Is that correct?
So the car is it's a normal Aston Martin, like the DB7, Vanquish, and then now DBS, Volante I have it. But question why I associate it with a classic car more pre-war? Because of the reason we did a restoration DB5, Kingsley Riding proposed me, they had a nice 1937 Tourer, which is a very elegant car. Then that is the first initiation for me as a classic car.
And that would be a Sutherland era car from the late 1930s period.
Yes, it is. And then I was proposed, it was a Sutherland era pre-war. And then Bertelli told me, Yuki, you better have Bertelli era, which is a Le Mans one-off body. And then we lucky to chance have it. And then again for Whisper, you better have a Bamford era. So it is very important for Aston Martin pre-war 3 era, Bamford era, Bertelli era, Thousand era. So that is why the Clover Leaf came to me.
You've really got virtually every factory era covered, and Bertelli era, obviously the Le Mans, which is 1933, is that right?
1933.
33, yeah, and with a special body, some unusual features. In fact, if you rewind all the podcast episodes to the one where Gary Taylor and I went to Japan, we were with you in Japan and we were looking at your car there. But the car you've got here today is the Bamford and Martin era, the car we now know as Cloverleaf, and you rode up the hill in the car today in the parade, didn't you?
Yes, it's really nice, and everybody smiling to us, and that's a fantastic day for me. And I was very lucky to be owner of Aston Martin. Wow. And also history to see today.
We're very, very lucky to have you as an owner, and the event is very lucky to have you as a sponsor. I know you have personally sponsored the event and helped make this happen, and that is amazing. And what a fabulous day. I don't think this will ever be repeated, unfortunately. It's a one-off day, but we're all enjoying ourselves. The public are enjoying it, and it's fabulous. Thank you ever so much, Yuki, on behalf of everybody. Thank you for sponsoring the event, and thank you for coming all the way from Japan to take part in it.
Thank you for giving me the opportunity to talk about. Thank you very much.
I've met lots of very, very interesting people today, and I've been very fortunate to bump into lots of people that I know, and thankfully I've just bumped into another dear friend of mine, John. I'll let him introduce himself in a moment, but this is a real piece of history right this second, because I'm stood here with John, who is the grandson of Robert Bamford. So that's the founder or co-founder of Aston Martin, or Bamford and Martin Limited, but the co-founder of what became our brand Aston Martin. And it's been fairly recent that we've really got our head around the proper story behind Aston Hill, and the fact that our founders came here and they raced their Singer cars in 1914. And the thing that I thought was absolutely so special was the fact that it wasn't just Lionel Martin that came here, it was Robert Bamford as well. So, John, tell everybody at home, I'll let you introduce yourself properly.
Right. John Paul Jakes is my name. My father was Robin Jakes, brother of Hattie, the actress. But anyway, my father married Patricia, Robert's daughter, in 1943. and they lived in Ditchling. And I was brought up in the house first few years of their life together. They split up, and I carried on with my mum living down in Sussex in the village of Ditchling on a farm. I, of course, didn't get a chance to meet Robert. I mean, he died 5 years before I was born.
You mentioned Ditchling a couple of times there. First of all, am I right in thinking that's where Vera Lynn came from as well? Is that right?
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. Vera Lynn was there. And a big artistic society. And I don't know why Robert ended up there. He moved there in 1933 till 42 when he died. He was in Ditchling, and he became a member of the Horticultural Society. He also became a watch and clock repairer.
I seem to remember, and you know, when you and I first met each other, you came in, I think you'd been invited in by one of our directors for a factory tour.
Simon Sproul.
That's right, Simon Sproul. And then my colleague was about to take you around the factory and was having a cup of tea with you, and then all this comes out that you're Robert's grandson. And Nick sort of said, hang on a second, and he came and got me and said, look, I think we need to swap factory tours because you need to meet this man. And that's how our conversation first started. And also you told me at that point that Robert, because he died in 1942 in the middle of World War II, and if I remember rightly, his daughter's fiancé was killed around about the same time.
Yes, he was flying Hurricanes, and he got killed. I think he got killed in North Africa delivering Hurricanes. But he was also called a Robin. His surname was Robin. So she was a Patricia Robin at one stage, and then of course she married Robin Jakes, my dad.
Yeah, of course.
Lots of Robins in her family.
Yeah, exactly. But because of that happening all around about the same time, Robert was buried, but without a headstone. So we knew exactly where he was in the graveyard at Ditchling, but there was no headstone to mark the grave. Is that right? If I remember rightly.
Yes, I'm actually now a member of the Ditchling History Project, and they put a book out and a CD of. They went round all the graveyards and found who was buried where, and of course there was Robert with his mother. So she died first. She died in 36, and so Robert's buried with her. And then there was no headstone, and you came and said, is there anything we can do? And the factory, the Aston Martin Owners Club and the Heritage Trust all together chipped in, and we managed to put a headstone up. And I went and got a local craftswoman to carve it, help me design it. Neil Murray gave us the rubbing off the rocker box of one of the early cars, the AM logo, which is not exactly the same as that is on the badge of the Aston Martin Owners Club, but it is what was on one of the cars, one of his early cars. I'm very, very grateful for that. It's quite a nice piece of work.
When I heard the story that he didn't have a headstone, it was just him. And we can't have that. We can't have our co-founder laying in an unmarked grave. So we, as you say, we chipped in. Going back to where we are today, we're on top of Aston Hill. I'm stood here with you, the direct descendant of Robert Bamford, the founder of the company. You know, I think this is what you call making history, isn't it, really, John? And
I marked up all the cars that had I got the pre-entry list, and I marked up all the Astons that of that ilk, of that era. Actually, a couple of singers, of course, as well. And I've just sat in one of the cars that
really means something.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Difficult to get into.
And another thing, just thinking as well, since we've known each other a few years, we had a very enjoyable half day in London a few years back, and you and I walked round Kensington and Chelsea to the various sites. We went to Henneke Mews, we went back to Abington Road where the cars were built, and we had quite an amusing incident where we were talking to the people in the little office, which used to be our office when the factory was in Abington Road, and explaining who you were to them, and then suddenly estate agents, that's right, and then suddenly a Range Rover appeared, or a BMW of some sort, and they said, oh, there's one of the residents, why don't you follow him in? And as the electric gates opened, we kind of jumped in behind him and ambushed him when he got out of his car, and when we introduced ourselves and said who we were, I think he was quite surprised to have you stood in the courtyard of where where the factory was in 1920. So, yeah, again, bringing history to life, really. But, John, it's really lovely to see you today. Thanks ever so much for coming along. And
also, many thanks to Mike for organising this. I mean, it is quite an extraordinary event. There's quite a collection here, isn't there?
It really is. I mean, it's hard to put this into words, really. I mean, we've got some of the most amazing Aston Martins here, right the way up to a DB4 GT Zagato, which, you know, is obviously a car that doesn't need a lot of introduction. And, I mean, where else would you see a DB4 Zagato with a pre-war team car on each side of it? It's flanked by two of the red team cars. Just incredible. And yeah, what an amazing day.
10 Temps, right?
Yeah, all part of the 10 Temps collection. So yeah, great day. Good to see you, John.
Cheers, mate.
And we'll see you soon.
Lovely. Thank you so much.
Take care. Bye. Well, there we go. What an amazing day it's been. In fact, actually, the last 2 days have been pretty incredible. It started off yesterday with Tom Wood and a bunch of pre-war enthusiasts that met in Aston Clinton for a driving tour around the local area in their pre-war Astons, and we had a chance to view the exhibition that had been put on in the pavilion at Aston Clinton Park. We also had a talk from Mike Stark, the co-author of the recent book written about the Aston Hill and the Hillclimb history. And that was great. And then I also had a chance to go up to the monument, as you probably heard earlier in the podcast, and record a little piece up there. And then today, after a kind of night in a local hotel for me personally, and then this morning I was up early and off to a local hotel to Aston Clinton to collect Yuki, the owner of one of the cars that was featured in the event, and in fact the car that featured in all the posters and also in the AML film that was made recently on Aston Hill with the Valkyrie. Picked Yuki up and dropped him off at Aston Clinton Park so he could go and join his car and drive up to the top of the hill in the parade of vehicles that were making their way up the hill today. Many of them actual cars, including the car that Yuki owns, that actually took part in events back in the 1920s and even the 1910s. There were some very, very old cars performing there as well, but from an Aston point of view, 20s cars that raced in period. And they all formed up at the top of the hill on the main showground with probably another 400 and something cars of all makes and sorts and types, but with a large number of them being Aston Martins. Really was incredible. The mixture of cars I was really blown away by. I didn't quite expect to see such a variety of Astons, ranging obviously from pre-war through to 50s Feltham cars. Chiltern Aston had an amazing display, as you probably heard earlier, and even things like a DB4 GT Zagato, one of the 19 originals, flanked by a pair of 1930s team cars. I mean, that's not something you see every day. That was really quite incredible. And a variety of people that we spoke to as well, including John Paul Jakes, who is, of course, the grandson of our co-founder, Robert Bamford. As you can probably hear from my voice, I am a bit tired. I think it's the best way to describe it this time of night. I'm back home now, and it's been a very long day, but I'm still buzzing. What an incredible event. I don't think it'll ever happen again, and I'm thankful to Mike and all the other people that organised the event in Aston Clinton and for doing everybody proud and making something we'll never forget. So there we go.
You're listening to the Aston Martin Heritage Podcast. Discover more about the story of Aston Martin, the cars, the people, the history with the Aston Martin Heritage Trust. You're always welcome to visit us at our museum in Oxfordshire, so find out more via amht.org.uk.